Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we've certainly seen a lot of things occur throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle, and it hasn't gotten any easier, and it hasn't gotten any smoother or any better. But there are some true and interesting developments that are occurring, and we must keep these in mind. But sometimes it's more difficult to do that than one might think. And the reason I say that at times it becomes more difficult to cut into the truth, to find the truth, or discover the truth, is because of the way that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have gone about just fabricating stories or presenting it in just such a lopsided fashion that we can't even get to the truth. We can't even begin to fathom where the truth begins and where their fantasy takes over. And nowhere has this been more apparent than in the coverage of the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian Donald J. Trump. Because everywhere we turn, it's painting Trump in a positive light, at the expense of all the other candidates, at the expense of those voters who have on more than one occasion come out and said that in absolutely under no circumstances would they support him. And that's a valid position to hold. It used to be a thing that we admired in this country, that we were free, that we didn't have to bow down to the wills of certain factions. And again, as I've brought up on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, when you look back at the warnings that George Washington gave in his farewell address about the true dangers of going to absolute factionalization, we're seeing that play out in the Republican Party right here, right now, in this 2016 election cycle. We're seeing American get pitted against American. We see infighting of the scope that we haven't seen in living memory, and it is driving a wedge so deeply into the party that I'm starting to think that it may be irreparably fractured. That no matter what decision we make, no matter what conclusion is made, we are once again, through some magic ineptitude, marching towards defeat yet once again. And it's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating because we know that the conservative mindset in the United States of America is not intellectually bankrupt as Fabian socialism is. We know that conservatism is a productive mindset, because it is the mindset that encourages entrepreneurialism unlike any other political philosophy or ideology. And you have to realize that given our relatively brief yet illustrious history, the way that the United States was able to reach such prosperous and lofty heights in such a short period of time is in direct correlation to the open and free style of representative republican form of government envisioned by our founding fathers at the inception of this country 230 years ago. But a lot of people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear it because they don't want to think about it. And they don't want to think about it because it would basically shift their internal way of thinking. It would challenge the entire perception they have of the world. But we've got to get past perceptions and get back to reality. Now, I know that's a difficult thing because, as I've said on past episodes before as well, that oftentimes in the arena of politics, perception plays a bigger, more important role than facts, figures, and reality do. But again, it is a dangerous trap if we allow this to play out as it does. And so now we look at Donald Trump and this notion that Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media has hoisted him once again into a position where he can whine and complain. And it seems to be the thing he's most proficient in, is whining and complaining. Not coming to the truth, not talking about things that matter, not proposing real-world, practicable, and workable solutions. No, it's come down to, if something goes against him or rattles his ego in any way, shape, or form, he goes in front of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media to whine and complain, as if that will somehow plead and argue his case to the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this great republic, we the people. It's asinine. It's asinine. Just like everything else with respect to his campaign, it comes down to these asinine notions that are completely detached from reality. Folks, if we are truly serious about putting this nation back on track, about restoring American prosperity, then we are going to have to get past the way that Donald Trump can just seemingly mesmerize masses of people, causing them to close down their mental faculties and just to emote. Because when you go into that emotion, that raw emotionalism, you become very susceptible to manipulation by a con artist. And think about what Donald Trump is. He's a master marketeer. He markets things. He brands things. Everything about him is a carefully constructed and crafted persona. It's not the real deal. He's not really that way. Now, of course, it does raise the question as to whether he even knows who the real Donald Trump is. It's a similar question that all actors have to ask themselves. And if you stop and think about it, Donald Trump is an actor. He's playing a role here. But that role is the role of a disruptor, a role of an usurper, the role of class clown and bully rolled up into one. You know, the type of student in the classroom that would never be serious, the one that would always get in trouble. Now, perhaps that is the real characteristics of his persona. Perhaps that is the face that lies beneath the mask. Because we do know that he was sent to that military academy for being a bit of a juvenile delinquent. And that plays out because even as a youth, the way he's always seen things work is that he's some sort of spoiled brat, for lack of a better term. I really can't think of another way to describe it, because he's essentially had everything that he's ever owned handed to him on a silver platter. Now, yes, where he's gone out and used a little bit of business acumen to expand that, I applaud him. I wouldn't deny that to anybody because I do believe in the free market. But does he? Does he? Well, no, not really. Because when you look at the protectionist type tariffs that he's been proposing, he would be starting a trade war with China. He would be placing these tariffs in the grand scheme of things, in effect, claiming that he would make the other nations pay for them. But folks, who pays for the tariffs? Ultimately, truly, when you look at a market, who pays for those tariffs? It always comes back to the consumer. And if you really want to change the type of imbalance that we're seeing on the trade scale here, it's not that we need to have less of their products bought in here. It's that we need to get it to where we're exporting more over there. Well, a protectionist tariff isn't going to work. On the same token, these fraudulent, made-up free trade agreements aren't going to do it either. The TPP and the TPA, they aren't going to accomplish that either. Because if it's truly free market, you don't need that type of manipulation. Of course, the juxtaposition that those who would want to rebut this point would come forth with is that you can't have a true free market solution because the other nations would place tariffs on you and there's nothing you can do to regulate that. But there is. The way you do it is, instead of placing just this bright line rule style tariff down, you limit any type of lending you do over there. You limit what types of visas you allow. There are ways to do it that wouldn't ignite a trade war. And I just don't think that Donald Trump has thought about it. But of course, the best way to approach it is to go back to the Constitution, to allow the Constitution to play out as it should. And that would invigorate interstate commerce in the United States, which means that our own products for our own people could become more competitive because we'd get rid of this ridiculous tax code and we could see America flourish again. This is the problem that we face with the Fabian socialists and the way that they have just entrenched themselves in every facet of society. But again, you're not going to hear this type of analysis from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, because they have fully invested themselves in this kind of golden candy wrapper image that they have created of the Donaldas. And therefore, it would be bad for business, bad for ratings, if they were to depart from that in any shape, form, or facet. So you're going to see them double down on this caricature that they've created, which, when you go back to the actual Greek words or the Greek roots of that word, it means a bad copy, essentially. And he's a caricature in and of himself, at least in the way that he has presented himself on the campaign trail throughout this primary season. And that's what makes him so dangerous, is because he's fulfilling all of these two-dimensional characterizations and straw man arguments that are fronted by the Fabian socialist left, so that if by some chance that he could secure the nomination, and even if he doesn't secure the nomination, the fact that he has performed so well during the Gutless Opposition Party, or GOP, presidential primaries gives them a facet to latch into, to sink their clutches into, and claim, look, 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 over there, the GOP, you got the war on women's, you got the war on minorities, he don't know like no Muslims. They're going to play that game. And the worst part of it is he satisfies and fulfills that. It will make it so incredibly difficult to rebut that and to come back from that because of the way that the salivating mainstream media always twists and obfuscates the truth. And folks, there really is no way of getting around that or sugarcoating that or diminishing that, except for the true grassroots of the party that can sit there and say, look, I was a part of the hashtag Never Trump movement. I took a stance against him because he was acting out all of the Fabian socialists' diabolical dreams, diabolical sketches of what true conservatives are, that I could see that he was just this two-dimensional, hollow, empty straw man being set up for some great ruse to play out in the general election in 2016. And that ultimately is what makes him distasteful to me, in unison with all of his consistently inconsistent policy positions, and makes him an unviable, an untenable, an unelectable candidate. Now, normally I hate to use that type of phraseology when describing a candidate, because that has been a blunt instrument which the detente wing of the gutless opposition party has been using to bludgeon the conservatives within the rank and file over and over again to try and once and for all prove that their wishy-washy detente members, the so-called establishment wing of the party, is the only way to go because they are the only ones that can win. Think of the Karl Rove types, because that is exactly who I'm speaking of here. Does he represent the values of the base of the party? I can tell you right here and right now that no, he does not represent the values of the base of the party. Now, he'd tell you he does. He'd go on to Chris Wallace's show there on the Fox News channel and do everything in his power, A, to convince you that he's not a piece of canned ham, B, to convince you that he is not the alter ego of Mr. Bucket, that 1990s game. If you don't know what that is, Google it, folks. You will get a real chuckle out of it. And 3, that no, he's not against the base of the party. That's just crazy talk. He's just, the way he'll spin it, the way he'll try and make it look good for him is that he'll say it's this wild, rabid, extremist fringe of the party that's trying to take it over, that's trying to tear it apart, that's trying to redefine who we are. But we're the compassionate conservatives of George W. Bush, and look how well it worked. Except, as memory serves me correctly, particularly during the latter half of his, being George W. Bush, term as president, second term of president, was a disaster. They were pushing for carte blanche, blanket amnesty, which ignited the wrath and ire of the base of the party. And then they keep trying to shove these wishy-washy, spineless, squishy candidates like John McCain in 2008 and then Mitt Romney in 2012 down our throats. And then we have to question ourselves when looking at some of the acolytes of Donald J. Trump. In particular here, I'm going to speak towards Matt Drudge and Little Orphan Annie Yep 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 Toto. Now, folks, I'd normally do my little high-pitch part here. We're making fun of her, but I'm a little under the weather right now. Have a bit of a cough, so it probably would not be the best idea for me to do that while speaking into this microphone right now. Do apologize. I am still here, though, to provide you with this indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment. But back to the point with Matt Drudge and Little Orphan Annie Yep Yep Toto and the caliber of the candidate they're supporting now. Normally, you'd think, oh, these are conservative bigwigs who are in the know, and therefore they're good. They're good to support Trump. That must mean Trump is fantastic. Well, let's roll back the hands of time for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Roll back the hands of the clock to 2012, back to 2012, when they were trying to run Mittens Romneykins, and they were trying to shove him down our throats and to convince us that he was a viable candidate. Now, folks, the two biggest cheerleaders for Romney were none other than Matt Drudge and Little Orphan Annie Yep Yep Toto. Now, if they were supporting the squishy, moderate, establishment wing candidate back then they're pushing for the spineless, squishy, establishment candidate now, except that Trump lacks the social graces to even be spineless. He's like one of those killer invertebrates. Think of an octopus, because it really does fit with him, folks. Octopi are able to change their color in an instant to blend in with their surroundings, to try and go after whatever they want to eat. And one of their favorite meals is to go after one of their own kind. So you see all of the characteristics exhibited in octopi behavior being exhibited by the New York vulgarian, Donaldolph Julius Caesar Trumpolini. It's kind of funny, but it's a very fitting analogy. And so, yes, he doesn't have a spine, but boy, does he have suckers, and boy, does his campaign suck. So they try and rip everything apart. But it's not the way that you're going to win in the general election, because you're going to disenfranchise and alienate huge swaths of the base of the party. But that raises the important question, because we know that he had a meeting, or at least a phone call, with Bill Clinton about a month or two before he officially threw his hat in the ring to run in the 2016 presidential election cycle last summer. And already that's raising the ire of significant questions. And it all revolves around his credibility. But there's all sorts of reports out that the most dishonest of the campaigns is Trump, by far. He lies more than any of the others. In fact, the funny thing is, if you actually run the biggest liar of 2015 or the biggest liar of 2016 into Google, Donald Trump's name is the first to come up. Now, that shouldn't be surprising to anybody who's been paying a modicum of attention throughout this entire election cycle, because Donald Trump has this magnificent ability to be consistently inconsistent. But right now, in the current climate and conditions of the arena of politics in the United States of America, I think that's the last thing we need. I think that in this drastic time, in these dark times, that America needs consistency, and not just consistency, but consistency that is rooted in the supreme law of the land. And as we have said so many times before, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. But if we go back to the coverage from the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media with respect to the New York Vulgarian, we don't hear any mention of the Constitution. We don't hear that as being a major central part of his campaign. That doesn't matter. That gets swept under the rug. As far as they're concerned, that's trivia or trivium, trivial knowledge. Why should we report on that? It has no bearing on modern things. It's all about the economy. It's all about this. It's all about whatever other ADD type moment they can just fling out in front of the popular sovereigns and hope that we buy into it hook, line, and sinker. Now, folks, that is trying to discount the knowledge of the American people too much, too far. We're a lot smarter than what they give us credit for. We have the ability, when we're not caught up with blind rage and fury, to see through the web of deceit that they have woven. And we can penetrate through that and find the light of truth, which I don't care what they say, I don't care what they try and obfuscate with, the truth always has a way of coming to the surface. And deep at its core, the truth itself has no agenda, and it sets us free. And think about that. Think about the term truth. And go back to the Declaration of Independence. That famous, beautiful, well-drafted document that states, we find these truths to be self-evident. You notice, it was the self-evident truth that we, the people, are endowed by our Creator, the God of nature, with certain fundamental and inalienable rights. That chief among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You see, folks, right there, those were the truths that set us free. Why are we not discussing these truths that are an integral part of the natural law that forms the bedrock foundation and basis of this great representative republic of ours and our constitutionally endowed government system? Well, we are hearing it from one camp. Texas Senator Ted Cruz has made that a central pillar of his campaign. He said that the Constitution is the cornerstone of his philosophy. And if you think back on that, folks, the cornerstone is what holds everything together. Without it, you have no structural foundation. You have no way in trusting the soundness or stability of what is constructed around it. It is such an important stone that that's usually the stone on a building where they choose to put the date on which the building was erected, because it is the key, quintessential part, the defining part of the structure or building or whatever is being constructed. It's amazing. And to say that the Constitution is the cornerstone of this great representative republic of ours is to repeat something that has been shoved aside in all of our institutions of education, whether it be primary straight through to postgraduate level studies, including law school, or if it's in the media. We're not really taught or instructed with regard to our civic duties and obligations anymore. Civics has become an afterthought in American education and American polity. And that is a crying shame, because without that, we lose sight of who we are. We lose sight of our national heritage, character, spirit, and above all, identity. And that is exactly what these Fabian socialists want to have happen, because it makes it easy to manipulate us and thereby easier to fundamentally transform who we are. And from that, we also see exactly why Barack Hussein Obama came up with the statements he did shortly before securing the presidency in the November 2008 elections. That of in 5 minutes, or we're 5 minutes away from fundamentally transforming the United States. That is what the dark, twisted machinations were. That was his plan. That's what he's looking to accomplish. Folks, I got to thinking about an analogy that is multifaceted and multi-tiered that applies to the 2016 presidential election cycle. So bear with me as I delve into this. Throughout America's history, we've seen incidences that occurred in the 19th and up into the 20th century where gold rushes would come over the country, and this notion of gold fever would capture the hearts, souls, and minds of the people, luring away those adventurers from the East who were seeking a better, more prosperous lifestyle to the West. I mean, we saw it with the California Gold Rush, we saw it with the Yukon Gold Rush, and people just were caught up into a frenzy. And the less scrupulous members of society would attempt to capitalize off of this, to hit these miners and prospectors when they were at their most vulnerable, to make a quick buck, whether it was honest or not. And we see that Frederick Drumpf, or Donald J. Trump's grandfather, had engaged in that sort of activity with prostitution and a restaurant and a hotel. In fact, that's basically where the Trump business laid its foundations. And it's fitting because it ties into the mindset that the presidency has become so far beyond anything that our founding fathers ever originally intended or designed for it to be. And that's thanks in no small part to the current narcissist who occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And what it shows, without any uncertainty, is that the presidency has become this powerful, magnetic influence on all of culture and society, that it is such an influential position that it draws people in just out of a sense of awe. They want to hold on to it just to get their hands on that sort of power. And when you think of the culminating fact of just how powerful and how large and how far divorced the highest office in the land is from the way it was intended and designed, you see the drawing force that pulls people like John Kasich into it. It will be the same type of effect, or have the same type of effect on him that it had on a lot of prospectors when they found iron pyrite or fool's gold. So you see, he's fooled himself into thinking that he has got an opening in which he can clinch the nomination. Of course, the only way that he'd be able to do it is through some underhanded, dark, twisted technicality in which he's screwing somebody over. And so it's funny because that analogy fits. It fits with his mindset, it fits with him, but it also fits with the hucksterism that I mentioned with Trump's grandfather. Now the grandson is doing the same kind of thing, but instead of just to prospectors who are going to mine for gold, Trump's doing it to average, decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizens who want their country to return to prosperity and to a modicum of sanity. And then, of course, you've got the honest miner who managed to strike gold and make a small fortune for him or herself. That would be Ted Cruz in the 2016 presidential election analogy here. And I enter into this analogy because when you look at just the grand theater and spectacle of the entire race and what it has been, and the type of deceptive, dirty tricks that have been played primarily on the part of the New York vulgarian through this notion of projecting his own viciousness, his own deceitfulness onto Ted Cruz. It's incredible because it plays out all of the worst and most negative aspects of what everybody claims to hate about presidential politics in the United States of America, and it puts it up on a pedestal. And all because people are saying that, well, look, Donald Trump speaks it as it is. I can trust him. No, you can't. Because he has been consistently inconsistent, it makes it impossible to truly know what he believes. And truth be told, I don't even think he knows what he believes. Now, that's not someone that I think we should trust with the reins of political power in this once great representative republic of ours. Now, America has not stopped being great, as Donald Trump would have you believe through his shallow, hollow, empty, and meaningless platitude of "Make America Great Again." And by the way, that's not even original. He got that from Ronald Reagan, who said, "Let's make America great again." But it shows that theater, perception, and perspective, all of which can be manipulated, has started to matter more to people than facts. That is new. Because I don't ever recall a time where the conservative faction and movement and ideology in the United States had ever been so deluded. We're facing delusions of grandeur. We're seeing people project their own hopes, dreams, and aspirations onto a particular candidate in the thought process that this would somehow benefit them, that he would ingratiate and enrich them. But folks, it can't work that way. There's not just some magic lever that Donald Trump with his tiny stubby fingers can grasp onto, pull down, and have it work like a slot machine where it gives everybody in the country a jackpot. That would devalue money. It would devalue the character and spirit of hard work. It would tear asunder the very American spirit, that pioneering attribute that allowed this nation to overcome every adversity that has ever been placed in its path in its relatively short yet illustrious history. And we have to keep that in mind, because if we allow ourselves to be tricked with the iron pyrite and we gamble our future upon it, we're going to just watch this country fall apart. We're going to watch the unraveling of the societal fabric of the United States continue at not only an accelerated pace, but unabated. Nobody's going to stop it, because Donald Trump shares a key characteristic, a key personality trait with the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Barack Hussein Obama. And that is this: if and whenever anything goes wrong, it is never his fault. No longer is it the notion of, as Harry Truman's desk plaque said, that the buck stops here. It's that we're going to pass the buck like it's a hot potato, and nobody is going to care. It's all going to be obfuscated. But the major difference is that Barack Hussein Obama squarely had the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media in his back pocket. This is not something that Trump has. Yes, currently in the primary process and season, he has them. But that's because the media is the one who is attempting to select our candidate. And you know, folks, this is another aspect that has just been amazing. Yes, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have said on repeated occasions that this is the election cycle in which we cast conventional wisdom to the wayside. But it's amazing that I thought we always said we didn't like the thought of the media choosing our candidates for us. And yet, some of the loudest acolytes within the Donaldus's camp are proactively celebrating this. I've even seen them come out and celebrate the fact that he is not a true conservative. Does that make any sense? If part of the problem of what we've been griping about with respect to the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, is that they have capitulated and collaborated with the Barack Hussein Obama regime anywhere and everywhere, that now all of a sudden we want somebody that negotiates with them? We want somebody who says everything is negotiable, and presumably, and we know for a fact it would include, our fundamental and inalienable rights, which by their very nature, having been endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature, are non-negotiable. He's going to negotiate with that. And think back to what he said in The Art of the Deal, where he always assumes the most hardline position to then whittle his way back to a more realistic goal, to a goal that he thinks he can achieve, instead of standing on principles. You see, folks, this is a prime example on full display for all of the popular sovereigns to see of Donald Trump's lack of principles. Yes, that may work for running a business. Great, fantastic. But it doesn't work for running a nation, because the United States of America is not a business. And our fundamental and inalienable rights and our liberties and our sacred traditions and our Constitution are not bargaining chips to be used in some backroom business deal that the Donaldus is notorious for engaging in. That's out of the question. That cannot be allowed to come to fruition, because that betrays and that is contradictory to all that we hold near and dear in this great representative republic of ours. We have to be cognizant of these facts because they are glaring, open, and obvious, and right out there in front of the mainstream media for everybody to see. But we're all so caught up in different fights, and we've latched on to the bait of the distractors, and it allows things to unfurl in a way that is diametrically opposed to the best interests of the ultimate wielders of the sovereignty, we the people. And it plays out that way, in a sense, because we become complacent, but also because, like fool's gold, we allow ourselves to project a rose-tinted vision, like a Norman Rockwell painting, of a future for this country, that instead of a chicken in every pot, there's going to be a money tree growing in every front yard, and it's all going to be made possible by Donald Trump. But folks, if it sounds too good to be true, that's because it usually is. You know, it's an asinine statement that Donald Trump said with respect to perhaps what most of his followers are drawn to him for. And that's this whole notion of, I'm going to build a wall. It's going to be a bigly huge wall. It's not going to be me that builds it. My fingers are too stubbly and littly to do it. But it's going to be a bigly wall, beautiful, like my hair. And we're going to use gold. And they're going to pay for it down there in Mexico. We're going to make them pay for it. But how? You see, that's the question that resurfaces over and over again ad nauseum with respect to Trump and all of his plans. Sure, it may sound great in a talking point or as a platitude in some great thumping speech, but when it comes to the practical logistics of it, when it comes to the reality of it, how do you make it come to fruition? It brings up that whole adage that's easier said than done. Well, here we are. It's easier said than done to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. How are they going to pay for it? How are we going to force them? Oh, through protectionist tariffs? Again, that's only going to come back and harm the American consumer, the American economy. It's going to be bad for American business. And is he really going to do anything to stop illegal aliens when he himself utilized the services of the Polish brigade, composed of some 200 illegal Polish immigrants, to demolish the Bonwit Teller store, upon which he then later erected Trump Tower right there in Manhattan? No. He's once again consistently inconsistent. He has spoken out of both sides of his mouth. He has used these things to his advantage, and then he gets mad when somebody like Texas Senator Ted Cruz goes out and uses the rules to their advantage, except in the arena of politics instead of that of business. How crass and hypocritical can one be? Of course, folks, that is a very, very rhetorical question. We know that Donald Trump, going back to the opening segment of today's solo flight special, was and is putting on a show. If Donald Trump were very serious about this and had a firm grasp on the rules of how the American system of polity works, then he would have had his own children registered as Republicans in closed primary New York State. But they weren't, and they aren't. And then they come out and have some fluff. I know Ivanka had gone before the cameras of the salivating mainstream media and claimed holding this piece of iron pyrite out so that we would all think it was gold. That, well, I was a registered independent. A registered independent? Please point out where there is a independent party that you can register to by the name of Independent Party. Who is the chairman of this independent party? I know of the Libertarian Party. I know of the Constitutionalist Party. I know of the Green Party. But I've never heard of this unique independent party. Maybe it exists. I know that there's a New Age Whig Party. Maybe she's a New Age Whig. Except I doubt it. I don't even think that they know what the Whig Party was. Few people do anymore. It's just staggering that they say they hire the best people, that they will have the best policies, that they know what's best for America. Folks, we should stop right there. We should stop right there, because it's not they who knows what's best for America. It's never the government. It's never some centralized thing. It's never some singular entity or force that knows what's best. It's the popular sovereigns that do. It's the popular sovereigns that are expected to and carry the duty and obligation alone to know what's best for this country. And as we've said, since our first episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015, the popular sovereigns are none other than we the people. It is the very starting sentence of the preamble to that sacred document, our shared United States Constitution. We the people. But that's not what you hear in the verbiage of the Trump campaign. That's not what you hear in his stump-thumping speeches. It's not the message you hear reiterated by the graduates of Pavlov's School for the Salivating Mainstream Media. No. It never comes back to these concrete pieces of reality. It never comes back to the ultimate concerns for the country. Instead, it stays focused always on this carefully crafted media image or brand icon of Trump. And we know that a manager or former manager of this rather shady Trump super PAC that closed its doors before the end of 2015, Stephanie Sigliciani, basically said that Trump wasn't serious about running, that it was all a charade, and that he illegally sent instructions to this super PAC in direct violation of federal election laws and federal election finance laws to tell them how to direct their message and to say what the goals were. It's amazing. He didn't plan on winning. This was to be some stunt, but for what? Well, partially to stroke his ego, but it's got to be something deeper than that as well, folks. And I think it's probably that he wants another reality TV show. Everything has to be about Trump. And the highest office in the land would be far too limiting for him. Because when you are president of the United States, you cannot be all about yourself, or else the country suffers dire, drastic, and unacceptable consequences. No, you have to be all about the popular sovereigns. You are the representative of all the people of the United States of America. And that's why I have to chuckle again with all of this kerfuffle over the New York values statements that Cruz used from a video of Donald Trump's long ago interview with the late Tim Russert at Meet the Press back in 1999, where he distinguished his values, which were very progressive, from the values of the vast majority of the people of the United States of America. And he said it's New York values. But the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media had their own twisted propagandistic agenda, which they wanted to push come hell or high water, and so they obfuscate and they ignore and they play dirty little tricks, like what we saw at that black tie gala in New York City, where every candidate but Ted Cruz gave their speech without the mics being shifted. And then what they did, and this is truly disgusting, they basically had a series of microphones, or maybe even just one shotgun microphone pointed at the tables, and they switched them so that you heard eating, knives and forks, all of that, while while Cruz was trying to deliver his speech. And then you see that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media dashed out to their various information media outlets to peddle a story, to peddle a crafted lie. And make no mistake about it, folks, it was a lie. That people weren't listening to him, that they were just being rude, that they didn't care what Cruz had to say. And you see, this is what you get for New York values. Spare me. That's what I get for seeing the salivating mainstream media play its twisted and dishonest game again. That's what we get from so-called members of the conservative media who have sold out their principles and shown that they are not true movement conservatives. That's what we get when we allow charlatans, hucksters, snake oil salesmen, and carnival barkers to dictate the policy of party and nation. That's not smart. That's not realistic. That is a fabrication. That is the obfuscation of the truth. And this is why we're the new resistance. We're going to point this stuff out. Yes, Rush pointed to it, said nobody else was getting mad about it. Well, it's probably not something that we thought they would use in such a way. Although it should have been thought of as that way. We have reached a new low in this country. We have reached a point that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have forgotten why it is that we even have freedom of the press included in the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. They are there to vet things. They are there to be objective. They are there to be a font at which the American people can congregate, find the truth, explore the facts, and make their own determination and decisions. But we have reached such a pivotal low in this country that they now want to dictate the terms of what we believe, how we think, what we can think, and even who we should associate with. That's not an American value. That's not in line with who we are as a nation and as a people. That's diametrically opposed to everything that we hold near and dear. It goes against the foundational image that our founding fathers created for this nation all the way back at its inception over 230 years ago. And what? For what? Why? What could we possibly hope to gain? What benefit could we possibly hope to secure from a deceitful tactic and strategy like that which is unfurling before our very eyes from the podiums of the salivating mainstream media? Folks, it's not about our benefit with them anymore. We are pawns in their game. We are pawns in the game of Donald Trump. We are the useful idiots that he will cast aside. After trampling upon our First Amendment liberties, think back to his statement of wanting to open up the libel laws and defamation to get rid of the public figure exception. Why? So he can viciously go after those who oppose him or disagree with him through our legal system. That is litigious beyond reason. That is litigious to the point of sheer insanity. And it goes against our core values, our core principles, and our national character, heritage, spirit, and above all, identity. But who's going to address that? Who's going to bring that out? We are. That's because we're the new resistance. We will lurk in every shadow to thwart any soul or entity or thing that would strip and deprive the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this great representative republic of their fundamental and inalienable rights. That is something that each and every one of us, in our capacity as popular sovereigns and American citizens, whether we be natural born or naturalized, are called to do. We're called upon to not only preserve our rights for posterity, but to protect the rights of our fellow citizens. That's why we can come together and redress our government for grievances. But how quickly we have forgotten, how quickly that has been swept under the rug because of the nefarious infiltration of the Fabian socialists into our institutions of education, from primary level education all the way through postgraduate studies. It's like a festering disease. It's a metastasizing cancer on the body politic of the United States. And if we do not act now in drastic and meaningful clarity, with swiftness of action and decisiveness, then this cancer could ultimately wind up killing our representative republic. And folks, the scope of that tragedy is expansive, because when you consider that our Constitution is the longest contiguous running constitutional document in the whole of world history, it means because we allowed ourselves to be swept up by the enamor of fool's gold, because we didn't know it was fool's gold, we're going to give up the most open, honest, freest system ever devised by the hands of mankind, yet divinely inspired by providence above for penultimate concerns. That follows the path of all sorts of despotism that has gripped various societies throughout human history. And it would be a great tragedy because our Constitution has served as a beacon, a guidelight, and a draw, drawing people in to be inspired by, to replicate our liberties. It saved more lives than any other document, except for maybe the Bible. But even then, we see the tangible aspects of the Constitution, the proper limited scope and application of government, mandated by the clear and concise language contained within its four corners. That is amazing. It speaks volumes about what that document has stood for and what our founding fathers were able to achieve. If we can tap into that spirit again, because believe me, folks, it is an inherent part of our DNA, not racism, as Obama would have us believe, but if we can tap into that pioneering spirit that is part of our birthright, then we can overcome all of these dark and twisted obstacles, and we can assume our role as popular sovereigns to begin setting this nation back onto the path to prosperity. But it's going to take a more proactive role on our part. We are going to have to be self-responsible, self-accountable, but in so being, we become self-determinant as well. Sticking with this gold rush and gold fever analogy that I started in the last segment, it's interesting to note that during the Klondike Yukon gold rush of the 1890s, there were rather unscrupulous individuals that would do anything in their power to browbeat anyone that had gold dust or any type of success prospecting for gold, and they would use violence and intimidation to do it. Well, we've even got that aspect of the analogy here in the 2016 presidential election cycle. We know that Steve House, the state chair for the Gutless Opposition Party, or GOP, in Colorado, as well as his family, have received death threats from upset Trump supporters who don't realize that the caucus process of Colorado was established in 1912 and that there was still voting, but it was through a series of conventions. But that's a time-honored tradition within our representative Republican form of government. So again, we have political neophytes who don't understand what's going on, and they conjure up some grand Trumpspiracy theory where there is none. And because of that, and because of the heightened tensions of this entire election cycle, we see that they go to the most base aspect of human character. They forget the code of decorum, they forget any modicum of cordiality, and they engage in death threats. They engage in terroristic threats, acting like barbarians. It's disgusting. If you don't like something and you want to change it, or you think something's criminal, you go through the criminal justice system. Kind of like what's happening with Paul Manafort. Not Paul Manafort, but his good buddy, Roger Stone. Roger Stone, who's been a major and powerful influence over the Trump camp, is now, according to Red State, being investigated. Roger Stone inspired threats of violence against delegates under police investigation. Oh, it's so amazing. So amazing, because he is the one that told Trump voters to go out and find these people. And I think he even provided the hotels where they were staying, the hotel rooms, so that Trumpsters, the followers of Trump, could go and vent their anger. Now, how might they vent their anger? Maybe by breaking a kneecap, maybe by shooting somebody, who knows? We've seen them vent their angers at protesters, yes, granted, annoying people that they are, by throwing haymakers, by ganging up on them, by just devolving into a cornucopia of chaos, violence, but above all, anarchy. Folks, this is the United States of America. We're better than this. We have to come to terms with the sheer bitterness and ugliness that has become a part of this campaign. Because these shocking and wanton displays of violence, these death threats, that doesn't represent our representative Republican form of government. That doesn't represent our values, our liberties, and all those things we cherish and hold dear. And to go through all of that because a primary or caucus didn't go in the direction of our favored candidate? Boy, thank God we didn't jump up and down like that in Alabama. Thank God we didn't jump up and down like that in Georgia. We, being Cruz supporters, you see, there has to be a modicum of reasoned understanding to the American system of polity in order to be objective about this. And so I once again lay this squarely at the feet of not only those nefarious Fabian socialists that have infiltrated all of our institutions of education, but I also lay it at the feet of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. Yes, there are good people out there. Yes, there are good, decent reporters who have been targeted for doing their jobs. James Rosen of the Fox News Channel comes to mind, and the way that he was attacked and targeted by Eric Holder and his Just Us department comes to mind. But then you have some of the people out there like Eric Bolling, and then people like Sean Hannity, who have clearly thrown away, cast aside any and all attempts at objectivity, throwing out a skewed image that is worthy of the Soviet Union's state-run newspaper Pravda. We don't do that here in America. Or we state it up front. It wouldn't be so bad if they stated who it is they supported, because then we'd have a modicum of understanding of where they're coming from, and we could take what they said with a grain of salt, or we could choose to avoid it if we didn't want to look into it. You know, that's the choice of the market. That's how a free market and the marketplace of ideas would work, and did work. That's how it was when our country was founded 230 years ago. Pamphlets, being their equivalent to talk radio or to the information media outlets, would state from the very beginning the position that they held. That is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, chose to very early on throw our support behind Ted Cruz, to tell you why. We're not going to tell you how to vote. We're going to explain why we came to the inevitable conclusions that we did. But we're not going to tell you how to vote, and we're not going to tell you how to carry out or exercise your fundamental and inalienable rights. But that seems to be a one-way street. Not with our cherished listening passengers and audience, but with respect to a lot of the Trump camp, and from Trump himself. They're going to tell us how to vote. They're going to tell us that if we don't vote with him or we disagree with him, that they're going to kill us and our family. This is insufferable. It's incorrigible. And it has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. What on earth has happened to us? Did we all take a big gulp of Aqua Flintissa, this new brand of great water out of Flint, Michigan? Aquafina is not going to be good, but there's now a new upscale Goldly luxury version, Aqua Flintilla, as if it would cure all problems. You see, it's the type of snake oil salesman tactics utilized by a Roger Stone, utilized by a Paul Manafort, where they project onto their rivals their own activities, their own wicked deeds, their own malfeasance, and expect it to stick. But when you have a complacent, collaborative, salivating mainstream media going along with it, at least in the short term, because we all know that they will throw Trump under the bus once it comes time for the general election, thereby removing his Teflon coating. But when you have this media playing along, things like repeating Lion Ted over and over and over again, hey, deceitful Don, why don't you tell your people to stop doing death threats? Why don't you tell people like Roger Stone that you're going to use your bigly bank account and your bigly army of litigious lawyers to go after him if he continues to threaten disturbing the peace and bringing police investigations onto your camp and followers? It's kind of, oh, what's that word? Oh, yes, common sense. But that's the problem. Trump doesn't operate from common sense because he doesn't have a modicum of it. He is doing the exact thing that his followers are doing. He is engaging in just raw emotionalism, something that's easily manipulated. He's impatient. He's impetuous. He has to move at the snap of a finger, and that's why his mind is always leaping from one inconsistent position to another inconsistent position, thereby making him consistently inconsistent. He's like an overwhelmed prospector for gold. But he's used his stash, which was handed down to him by Daddy, to expand an empire, to use his money for his own self-interest, and then decry anybody who would use their wherewithal, their own creation, their own creative mind, and the rules in such a fashion as he did, as being unfair, twisted, wrong. Oh, and remember Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson? Yes, he came out and compared the rules in Colorado for their caucuses and the distribution of the 34 delegates of that state to Jim Crow laws. That's cute. That's real cute, Dr. Carson. It's very cute. It's totally off point. It's totally irrelevant. It's totally wrong. But I don't expect anything from you anymore because you have underperformed in every aspect. You have shown that you can be bought for 30 blood-covered pieces of silver. It comes back to that whole notion of it takes a lifetime to build a reputation, but you can blow it all up in a minute. That's what Dr. Carson has done. It's exactly what he's done to himself, and he has no one else to blame for it but himself. And I love how there are still those that are going to try and argue that this faux issue in Iowa was anything. Even Carson himself admitted that it was CNN that put that out. And is anyone surprised that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media would be engaged in deceit? No, of course not. And then, of course, there's the fact that the Trump camp was doing it and that the Rubio camp was doing it. Yet Carson chose, maybe because he wants to go all Jim Crow against Ted Cruz, to selectively enforce his anger, to selectively choose a target at which to be angry. Yet it was he who said he was going back to Florida to buy a new pair of clothes. What, they don't sell suits in Iowa? Or I mean in New Hampshire? I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do throughout all 50 states. So that's a lame brain, harebrained excuse. It's all part of a cover story. It's all part of a twisted machination. It's all part of that kabuki theater of American polity unfurling before our very eyes throughout this entire 2016 presidential election cycle. But what does it get us? Violence? Death threats? The loss of friendships? We've seen all of these scenarios play out, all because emotions and tensions have reached fever pitch in our republic. From coast to coast and border to border, we are sensing fear. There has been a lot of fear-mongering going on throughout this election cycle, as if they are purposefully turning up some faux sense of tension for a reality television program. That could be. That could be. They think we are so dumb. They think that we have no self-worth and no self-respect, that they will insult our intelligence like this, and we'll just buy into it because we're hearing only what we want to hear. Folks, that is a state of self-delusion. That's not beneficial. It's going to blind you to reality. It is going to dull your senses, and it's going to prevent you from being able to take swift and decisive action when necessary to protect your rights. That's the last thing I want to see happen to the American people. That's the last thing I want to see happen to the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this great representative republic of ours. But if we can't come to terms with this, if we can't figure out what has happened and who is doing what because we're so busy fighting each other, attacking each other instead of agreeing to disagree or looking for common ground, that we have reached a point where no matter what happens, it's going to be handed to Hillary. But we have to lay blame for the mind, or lack thereof, that created this atmosphere, this venomous, poisonous atmosphere, this toxic taint that exists and hovers over the United States like some insipid miasma. The first one to do all of that, to create this environment, to stir the pot, was none other than New York businessman, billionaire, real estate tycoon, and all-around Bulgarian, Donald J. Trump, a.k.a. John Barron, a.k.a. John Miller. Remember, going back to the Polish Brigade lawsuit, which, by the way, was settled, even though Trump claims he's never settled a lawsuit, there is another example of an untrumph, like an untruth, but even further. This untrumph was just amazing because he did settle it. And it came out during the course of that trial that he used his alter ego of John Barron to intimidate and threaten the lawyer for the 200 Polish illegal aliens who had availed themselves of the law by working here. They weren't citizens, and so that meant Trump could screw them. And he said, if you don't back off, if you don't let things go, I'm going to make your life hell. Folks, That's a bit like what the Roger Stone inspired things were. Go and vent your anger to them. Go and intimidate them. Go and shout them down. Go and threaten to kill their families. Rah, rah, rah. That's what we do in Camp Trump. But it's not what we do in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. That's not what we do in a great representative republic like ours. Civil discourse, not pure civility, because no political outing, no political process can be purely civil because of its adversarial nature, but civil discourse, that can be there, particularly when dealing with members who allege to be a part of our own party. And that brings me to the question of why has Trump done nothing to go after the Democrats? Why has he only been pointing the finger at his fellow Republicans, throwing out the same type of slanderous attacks that we hear repeated over and over and over again by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media throughout the various information media sources outlets? It's disgusting. It proves once again that he is not whom he claims to be. Why would we buy into a liar? Why would we hand the reins of political power of this great representative republic to a huckster, to a snake oil salesman, to a carnival barker, to the P.T. Barnum of this age, where he says, I'm going to build a wall and I'm going to make Mexico pay it for it. But he thinks you are all suckers, and there's a sucker born every minute. It comes down to reality versus perception. What he's offering us is not a true opportunity. What he's telling us is not what he believes. Think back to the tape given to the New York Times. Think back to the fact that his two of his children, Ivanka and Eric Trump, aren't even registered Republicans and didn't even care enough to go register on time and follow the rules. He is trying to sell us fool's gold for the price of gold by the pound. He is a counterfeit candidate, a Trojan Trump. And if we allow him to secure the nomination, it will be disastrous for the party. And not just for the political party. More importantly, it'll be disastrous for the nation, because this is a chance when we have an opportunity, a golden one, to allow for a constitutionalist, a pure, dedicated, die-in-the-wool constitutionalist who is dedicated to removing the chains and shackles of governmental servitude, tyranny, and bondage, so that the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, can do our part, as only we can, to turn this country around and set things right again. We have that opportunity, so that we don't have to go to drastic measures that are destructive, so that we don't have to tear our nation apart, so that we don't have to go through the bloodshed, the carnage, and everything that past generations of Americans had to. But you see, that old adage is being ignored. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. Here we are, folks. We see ourselves. The historical record is there, clear and black and white, for all to see, for all to find. Easier than ever now with this information revolution that we've had with the internet. And we're ignoring it. We're just closing our hearts, our eyes, our souls, and our minds to it, and we are going to waltz into chaos because we're oblivious, and willfully so. You see, that's what makes it so bad, is that we are being willfully blind, willfully deaf, and willfully dumb, meaning we're not speaking the truth. Except that we here, as the new resistance at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, we are speaking the truth. I don't expect you to take what I'm saying here at face value. I want you to look into it, dig into it, see if you can find what I'm saying to be matching with your own view. Or if only parts of it do. That's fine. If you're a Trump supporter, okay. I know we disagree, but at least look into it. I look into the claims you guys make. That's got to be a two-way street too. But it's not. It's similar to what we have seen with the left-wingers for years. They'll make a claim and then they expect you to disprove it. That's not the way things work. If you're going to make a claim, bring solid, concrete evidence to back it up. Cite your sources, have references. It's fair. That's the way that we have a discourse in the marketplace of ideas. It's not through trickery, it's not through deception, and it damn sure isn't through death threats or inciting violence. But I can only think of one campaign that does it. One campaign that has violence swirling all around it. One campaign that claims that protesters violate the rights of the Donaldas, even though the First Amendment is designed to protect against governmental encroachment, who then turn around and say, we're going to have protesters in Colorado. Oh, but it is so fascinating to see all the photographs that have popped up from the Trump-planned Trump test down there in Colorado. Some 200 people turned up. An amazing spectacle. 200 people! It's amazing! Wright Scoop had a piece on it, and I believe Red State also has a piece on it. It's amazing to see. But I thought, and maybe this is why so few turned out, that protesting was encroaching upon the First Amendment rights of others. I heard Trumpy say it. I heard a lot of his acolytes repeat it, as a flock of birds would. Ah! Ah! It's encroaching upon his his free speech. We have no idea how the First Amendment works. Yeah. Don't fall into that trap. Don't fall into the Trumpspiracy theories. They don't work. Leave that to Alex Jones. He's the crazy one. Don't drink the poison. Don't join in with, to steal a Trump tax phrase here, instead of syntax, it's Trump tax. Don't buy into the shenanigans of the cuckoos. People like Alex Jones and ever increasingly Matt Drudge and little orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto Coulter. Because what they are doing is trying their damnedest to divide the American people, to ensure a loss for conservatism. Why? Because it's bad for business. Oh, they can sell more books, or they'll have more link clicks if we have a continuation or a third term of Obama, or else they'll get it from Trump, because he is spectacularly vulgarian and vulgar in his style and in his delivery. We have to get back to a modicum of sanity. We have to get back to intelligent discourse instead of ad hominems and vicious platitudes. Because if we continue to operate in a divided fashion like this, the Fabians will stomp all over us and they will conquer us. I have reached the olive branch out. You can either take it and accept it, or you can accept blame for continuing to march down the divisive lane of Trump Avenue, pitting American citizen against American citizen. You can continue to follow Trumpolini in his fascist-like march to strip and deprive us of our God-given liberties. Or you can take a principled stance as an American citizen, as your founding fathers would have expected. You can stand up for liberty. Doesn't mean you have to vote for Ted Cruz, but at least we need to start holding both candidates accountable. Do I think that some of the rhetoric from the Cruz camp that got Rick Tyler fired could have been handled differently, more intelligently? Yes. And I am glad that Ted Cruz took the step that was necessary to ensure that those who were responsible for it were held accountable. I have yet to see that happen once in the Trump camp. Yet to see it happen once. But I do see the wife of the district attorney who was in charge of the Michelle Fields case go gallivanting around with Trump. Methinks the Trumpspiracy theories are locked away in Trump Tower, while made-up conspiracy theories are thrown out our way via a ready and willing outlet from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. But I'll let you decide. With that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send back the flight attendant with one last round of alcohol. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to personally take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer, even though I've got a little bit of a cough. I also invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you have either here at our YouTube page or at our Google Plus page or our Facebook page. And I also invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at RadioAviationEX, at RadioAviationEX. And there you'll find our departure board that has my Twitter account, my personal Twitter account, my First Officer Jeremy Grapenton's personal Twitter account, our Blogspot account, as well as our Cafe Press account, where you'll find a bunch of trinkets and goodies, from clocks to drinking glasses to apparel, that have our logo on it or the first class passenger special logo on it. Go ahead and give us a little bit of support, folks, so we can continue to bring you some enlightenment. And we will see you next time. Do take care.